Hey everybody, welcome to Somebody's Blues episode 2. I'm your host, Eric McKelvin, Festival Director of the New York State Blues Festival. This is a new podcast series that is setting out to explore the history of blues in central New York, in our region and beyond, and in general to have an open and diverse conversation about this great American art form. Joining me today is singer-songwriter and harmonicist extraordinaire, Pete McMahon. Pete is of course known for his work with the legendary Syracuse-based group, the Kingsnakes, as well as John Lee Hooker, Savoy Brown, and his own Pete McMahon and the Supernaturals. Hi, Pete. Thanks for joining us on Somebody's Blues.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it. Like we were just saying earlier, I'm looking out the window here. What is it, December 29th? A little bit of a snowstorm in the middle of a pandemic, just after the holidays, and we're in this crazy time we're living in, huh? So this is a good thing to do, talk about the blues.
Yeah, it really is. And, and who knows when we're going to be able to really be back out and getting down in person. We'll spend the time. It's like everybody's woodshed time, right? It's
there
like,
you go.
Get better at your instrument, get better at your presentation, and for those in the audience, they can, learn and study about all the great stuff going on in the world. So
Sure.
Well, yeah, one of the things that we were just chatting about is how we're trying to share some of the information about how blues got started in Syracuse and how that scene got developed and how some of the early bands got together. So why don't you go ahead and give us, how did it start for you and what were your first musical experiences and how did all that go?
Yeah, my story is probably similar to a lot of people that become kind of like blues musicians or whatever you want to call it. But like, I think when I was like 11 years old, I used to like hop cars in the neighborhood, on snowy days like this. Our friends would go up. There was this corner store called Maloney's. I lived up by Onondaga Park on the southwest side of Syracuse. And we were hopping cars, I think, and there was some older hippies in the neighborhood that used to hang out and smoke weed on the corners or whatever. And I think one of them lost a harmonica, it dropped on the corner. And this back in the days, like when Bob Dylan probably made the harmonica kind of famous back, late 60s, that kind of thing. And I remember finding that it was like squished, like they call it like the tin sandwich, but it was like squished, you know what I mean? From somebody like sitting on it or whatever. But I remember playing it and I can't remember how long I had it, but I ended up losing it too. So that was a wandering harmonica. And so I played a little bit, but I remember seeing, people in the neighborhood, a little here and there walking home from school or something. Like I said, that was more like the Bob Dylan kind of thing back then, then when I was 12, I got a harmonica from my sister in like a stocking, that they hang on the fireplace thing. And I remember grabbing it and going up in our attic. We had like a live-in attic because we had 8 kids in our family. I went up there and I played for like a couple of hours. I think, really had kind of an experience, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just relating with the instrument. And the rest is history from there. I just really got glued to the harmonica. And one thing, I remember I was thinking to myself, what I'm going to try to talk about in this thing. And I remember my first time kind of experiencing the 1-4-5 thing that they talk about in blues, the kind of progression, whether you do it fast or for a slow blues, but it's the same thing, that 1-4-5 key progression. I remember my brother Paul, who's 14 years older than me, he passed away, but he had this a lot of music in my house too, with a bunch of sisters and all that, 45s and all that kind of thing. But I remember hearing this one song called Blues Theme. It's like a biker kind of song. You have to look it up. And I remember hearing that. I would go into his room and listen to that when I was hearing it. It's like something about it, you know what I mean? Hearing that 1-4-5. And this is probably when I was 8 or 9 years old or something, you know what I mean? But that's kind of my first, you get that goosebumps kind of thing, you know what I mean? Or something kind of reaches you like that. But my other brother, Joe, who's 7 years older than me, we used to sleep in the attic and share a room. And he was kind of a little bit of Latter-day hippie kind of, partier kind of thing. And he would come in, he had an 8-track player in the room, and he would come in from being out, late at night, and I would already be half asleep, and he'd put in like, a John Mayall's 8-track or Geils or Allman Brothers. It was that kind of thing, you know what I mean? And he'd pass out, and then I'd be like wide awake listening to the music. I'm a younger guy, and the 8-tracks, they just keep playing, you know what I mean? Like it just never stops, so he'd fall asleep and I would hear this stuff and it would just like hardwired into my brain, and so I'd had the harmonica by then, and this stuff was just like getting ingrained in me, and my next door neighbor, Tommy English, and they had a lot of good music. And I remember growing up here in Savoy Brown, and when they'd be in their room with the cool guys, with their cowboy boots and blue jeans, long hat, jean jacket kind of thing. So like, I remember when I first got asked to join Savoy Brown, I was like, wow, what a trip, that from like being a young teenager and hearing that stuff and being like, that's what is like really cool, you know what I mean? Then you become part of something like that. So it's just it's a fun road that you travel to.
Sure. So what? That early '70s Savoy Brown stuff was. I had some older buddies who played in a band that were into that, Too Tall to Mambo and all this stuff, and it was like. It's funny, like it hasn't. It's one of those things. I feel like some of that stuff is a little bit lost to like classic rock fans out there. That maybe it doesn't have as much of an audience as it should, because it's really fun. That early '70s era was just such a fun blend of really when rock music still had some roll in it or whatever. You know what I mean? There was that.
Yeah, there's a lot of blues influence in like bands like Savoy Brown. So that's why it was cool to me. And
sure.
You know what I mean? A big part of the, it's like a essence of the band. That's why that music had like, substance and soul to it.
Yeah, well, and it's there's a funness, I think, that unfortunately rock music after that time period started to lose, where things became more just the rock, the simpler beat and the crunchier guitars. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just a matter of that the other things sort of went away for a little while, and then it ended up making a gigantic comeback in the '80s with the whole blues explosion across the country with SRV and Thorogood and all that stuff, and
definitely
the great things coming up as well. But what was so when you got into how'd you get into playing with other people, and what were your first band experiences?
I would like, the cool thing about me with the harmonica is like when I was, really early teenage years, there wasn't a lot of like band. I wasn't playing with bands and stuff. Just playing like, I would play when I was out with my friends and, like solo, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you try to get things going and people get, kicking their feet and stuff. So it was really good.
That's cool.
Exercise.
Sure.
Like, and there was a couple friends in the general neighborhood that played, my friend Tom Murphy and this guy Paul Epic, and we would have like jam sessions just with the harmonica, you know what I mean? And try to like, exchange ideas and all these things, and you developing and evolving and learning the instrument. Then I think actually like the first music that I was playing was with this guy. He was young back then. He's like 2 years younger than I am. And I was like, say 14, 15. He was 12 and 13, but he was like a prodigy on bass guitar, Mike Schofter. And I actually ended up working with him later. He had a tree trimming service, and I did some of that stuff in the late 90s and with him. But he was big into Jaco Pastorius, like he could really play all that kind of virtuosic bass guitar. But he had a couple friends from the Valley, Bobby Budd and his older brother Kenny Budd, and Bobby Holtz played drums. So these were like my teenage years, and I remember my first paying gig was doing a Shea Middle School like graduation party, kind of prom, something like that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like 15. Like I say, Mike was like 13, and got my first paying gig. So 15 years old.
Yeah, cool. So What about was the Kingsnakes your first blues group, or were you playing? Did you play with
No, I had like
groups? Were you doing blues
I
stuff?
had like a little bit of evolution. So like I say, I would do that, and we play house parties and stuff through the teenage years.
Yeah.
And then I remember Jody Grenier, who lived in that neighborhood too, down by Mike Schofter's house. He would take me across the street to his buddy's house, Phillips's, they had a piano there, and he played in the Sandy Big Tree Band back then.
Okay.
Terry Mulhauser from the Kingsnakes, who I ended up with.
Yeah.
This is back, later 70s, mid to late 70s, and he showed me the 1-4-5 that we were talking about earlier on the piano. He'd say, okay, this is like, say, the E chord, you're playing like this, then you go to A, and that kind of thing. So you're doing the 1-4-5. He was trying to explain it, and I actually didn't understand it, in musical terms, but you could feel it. You know what I mean? You could say, okay, yeah, I'm getting it. There's the change, and so on. So all that kind of stuff was part of my upbringing with it, and understanding of music and stuff. And then let's see. Then I got to be playing my later teenage years with, like you were talking earlier, you said about Woodshed and that kind of thing. It reminded me of this guy, Otis Lee. I played in the Otis Lee Blues Band for a few years off and on. And during that same time, with a guy named Don Zog, who was kind of a legend from the south side of Syracuse, who he was doing Savoy Brown stuff. You should have Terry Mulhauser on here sometime. He can go back further than I can go. You know what I mean? With Syracuse,
I definitely will. Yeah.
He was doing Savoy Brown stuff in the late 60s when Savoy Brown was just coming out too. You know what I mean? He was in a band called Scarecrow Jones. But I played with him in D-Zog and the Hellhounds and Otis Lee Blues Band. And they were kind of some rough guys, and we would play some rough places and so on and so forth. So that was good.
Yeah.
Experience as far as getting into the blues world, the real thing, And I also played with this guy, Frank Corso, who's like, he does the barrel house blues kind of stuff, the old, Robert Johnson and so on, with those resonator silver guitars, that have the palm trees on the back and the resonators. And Jody Grenier, who I mentioned earlier, he was in that. We had a thing called the Barrel House Blues Trio that we used to play down at Freddie Pratt's and some different places. That was down on South Geddes Street. These late 70s, starting to go into the 80s. And
so let me get into that if I may, to that little era, because now I've asked a lot of people about blues history stuff, and this is the first time that anybody's really talked to me about that scene, about Southside and about late 70s, early 80s. A lot of people will say Kyle Shirley turned me on to stuff in the early 80s, or it was you guys, or so. Yeah. But this is good stories, because this is where I was like, well, how did it all sort of get to that point? Like you guys had already obviously had some experience by the time you were doing the Kingsnakes. It wasn't like you just showed up formed like that.
No, exactly.
So, and I don't know, for whatever variety of reasons, I feel like that the Syracuse music history hasn't heard that much about maybe some of these other groups. This is, like I say, these are some newer names to me. Maybe not everybody, but I wasn't aware of Otis Lee Blues Band. And so
there would have been no Kingsnakes if there wasn't people like Don Zog. Yeah. And Otis Lee. They were like doing the real thing, blues,
Okay.
Way before it was cool.
What were the audiences like at these places? Was it all was it predominantly African American, or was it mixed, or?
Mixed. I played all kinds of places with those guys. We play, Central New York area, but just a lot of different funky places. And I remember we play. One time we played a gig up in Central Square with the Otis Lee Blues Band, and predominantly white, country kind of thing. And people loved us when we were playing and stuff. But as the night was going on, and people were getting their beers going and all that, they ended up being they started giving us crap at the end of the night because half of the band was African American, and Minnie Lee was there. Otis's wife, Minnie Lee, who was a big woman. And, we started trying to pack up our stuff really quickly and get out of there. And they were following us out in the parking lot and so on. There was big Rumble, and
Oh, jeez.
I think Minnie sliced a couple pieces. She had a thing which she called Quicksilver, you know, like people were walking by, she was just slicing them. And
Jeez.
but that's that's the kind of stuff that was like blues boot camp.
Yeah, absolutely.
That laid the foundation for like the Kingsnakes thing, you know. But those guys were the real thing. So it was a good experience to learn the fundamentals of blues music and that kind of lifestyle and stuff. What's going on?
Sure. So, so did you know Terry then?
Like I say, Terry. It's interesting because what happened then is there started to be more like formalized. People were making formalized attempts at doing blues bands. Like there was this band, Triple Shot, which was like late 70s and then into like 1980, I think. And that was Kelly James, you know, Dr. Blue.
Yeah.
Seth Holzman, who was a great harmonica player. I think he's from Philadelphia originally, but he was up here, you know, from a Syracuse University thing and ended up hanging around here and so on. And Henry Brent was on drums, and this guy Joe Chalesky on guitar, and Paul Laurent on bass guitar, who ended up being in the Kingsnakes. So all these different avenues, like, you know, came and then that's what made the Kingsnakes. But it was like an evolution, you know. Yeah. It was the right time, right place, all that kind of thing. But so that's where I first met like Kelly, and great guy. And at the end of the Triple Shot thing, Kelly called me to try to have me resurrect the band because it was kind of fading. I think some of the different people were moving back out of town from being, you know, SU students and so on. And I remember doing a few weeks of rehearsals and stuff, but that thing just dissipated, you know. And so Kelly and I stayed in touch closely for like the next couple of years and made like 3 different attempts to get what eventually became the Kingsnakes. But we did it one time. It was Too Bad James and the Mississippi Mules. I remember we were opening up for shows at Cannon's Ballroom for like Chicago blues acts that Kyle was bringing in. And that had Joe Chalesky from Triple Shot was on guitar. He could really play that guitar parts for like Little Walter stuff and all that. It was killer, you know. And but then that fell apart after a while. I know Joe Chalesky moved, and then there was another band. I forget what it was called, but we opened up for another couple shows at Cannon's Ballroom for you know, some touring Chicago acts, Eddie Clearwater, a bunch of different people. And then the third time we tried, he was like, and he called me again. He goes, "Pete, okay, I think I got this guy." And he was talking about Terry Mullins. He goes, "I saw this dude last night, man," because he was out scouting, you know, musicians to say who would fit in this band. He saw Terry Mulhausen, I think with the band Axe Handle. This is after Sandy Big Tree Band. And he says, he goes, he's just a, you know, a short guy, man, but he just blasts out the blues, you know. And he goes, at the end of the night, I was talking to him, I thought he was blind because he plays with his eyes closed, you know. But so that's how that happened. And then one thing led to another, and that, you know, became the incarnation of the Kingsnakes. Yeah.
So yeah, at first you guys were, Kelly was in the band, or it was like Kelly and the Kingsnakes?
It was Dr. Blue and the Kingsnakes for like the first year. And we were doing, you know, different shows around here and there. And then we settled into a place called Nappy's on the north side. It was like it was an old strip joint that had like mirrors on the back of the stage, you know, and we like they would hang up blankets and stuff to try to, so, you know, otherwise it was strange looking. But so that was a good place for a blues band, right? An old strip joint. It had a good stage, and it was a cool place too. It was, you know, just the right size. It wasn't too big, wasn't too small, and it's kind of a lot of padding in there, so the sound was good. And we really evolved there because we were like the house band there. We brought in a lot of national blues acts that we would open up for, and John Hammond came there quite a few times, and we'd open for him. Then he'd have us up and back him up towards the end of his set, which was a real privilege, you know.
Yeah.
just really cool stuff going on. It was a really fun time. Like you said earlier, that was the start of the 80s thing, because this was like the earlier 80s, and
Yeah.
it went crazy.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. And so then when did the Kingsnakes, you guys started obviously to get out of the region, like not too long after that, right? You started to hit the road more, right?
It took off, and we rehearsed. We were like a well-rehearsed band. We had
Yeah.
a rehearsal studio right around the corner from Nappy's in this old warehouse. This huge cushion that went, or this huge couch that went all the way around the outside, so we could get comfortable there and play. It was like, second home from home,
Mm-hmm.
And we rehearsed like every Tuesday and Thursday at least, and then we would play weekends. And then we got so busy that we would have to squeeze in rehearsals because we were playing most every night of the week.
Sure.
It exploded.
Yeah, and then so then you started playing out of state and going back down south and stuff, I guess, right?
Yeah, we just started chipping away, and then started doing East Coast runs and all kinds. It was a really fun experience. We got to, we basically got to live out our dreams to try to, we were
Sure.
big admirers of like the Fabulous Thunderbirds and the Nighthawks and different bands like that. And then we were out there playing all the places that they were playing, and
Right.
up and down those roads.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. So, yeah, I was saying, I mentioned to you earlier, the first time I saw you guys, I was, I think, I don't know what month it was, whatever. I was 16 or 17. I saw you guys open for BB King at it was like a Urban League.
Remember that gig at the Landmark? That was a good gig. And I'll tell you too, we opened up for him like 3 times, like once in Buffalo, a couple times here, maybe 3 or 4 times. But I've talked to other bands too. Somebody like BB King, who's touring nonstop, major star, the king of the blues, and he would, every gig where he had a band that would open up for him, he would come into the dressing room of the opening act and shake our hands. Like every gig we did with him, he did. It's like, "Hi, I'm BB King." It's like, whoa, we know who you are. But I mean, what a gentleman,
Yeah.
to do that. And then after a while, when I got to be on the road like that quite a bit, you realize how gracious that was of him, because you're tired on the road, man. You're traveling, then you're getting, and sometimes you take that time just to kind of rest before you got to go out and do the gig yourself. But it just shows what a gentleman he was, and real dignified emperor of the blues there.
Yeah, very cool. So where's how far did you guys where did you guys go out to West Coast at all or anything? Or?
We did. The Kingsnakes did. If you look at North America and split it right down, like down the Mississippi and then up the middle of Canada, we did all of that a lot. We zigzagged all over the place. And like the last gig we did with John Lee Hooker was 1990. He headlined the Chicago Blues Festival, and we were backing him up, and he had all kinds of special guests with him. He had Willie Dixon came out on stage, and
wow, that's awesome.
One of the drummer from Jimi Hendrix's band, I can't remember his name right now, but he sang, Them Changes, that Buddy Miles,
a
bunch of people. But it was so it was really something.
Yeah, that's awesome. So how did you meet John Lee Hooker, and how did that sort of come about?
The Kingsnakes opened up for Hooker in 1996 at the Lost Horizon, and I got up the nerve to go back after our show and talk to him, in the dressing room, and I went back there and I just told him, I'm a big fan of his. He's a legend, and
Mm-hmm.
and then I got up the nerve to say, hey, I was wondering if I could possibly sit in, and I was saying, in the spirit of like Al Wilson, he loved Al Wilson from Canned Heat.
Yeah.
There's a real famous album, Hooker and Heat, it's called. It's brilliant. That's killer. That was a huge influence.
Blind Owl.
And the Blind Owl, exactly. And so I was asking to say, in the spirit of Al Wilson, could I sit in with him? He looked at me, his eyes were like, whoa. And then he had this big tour manager at that time named Yogi. He was a big Hawaiian guy. I think he was like 6'7", 320 pounds, you know what I mean? Then he came back and he's like, "Oh, everybody out of the dressing room," as well, he was doing his job, I was thinking he's kind of mean at that time, but he's just doing what a road manager is supposed to do.
Sure.
And I remember getting escorted out of there and looking back, and Hooker was looking at me like he felt terrible.
Mm-hmm.
He couldn't even say anything. He was just like looking at me like I could see he was saying I'm sorry with his eyes. And so I got to talk to him after the gig too, and it was really cool. I remember mentioning once, I said, "Hey John, you do like these new bands coming out? You like the Fabulous Thunderbirds?" And he says, "Oh, you mean Jimmy Ray or Stevie Ray?" He was showing me he was hip too,
Yeah.
all the cats that are out there. But so then, like a week and a half after that gig, I think we were rehearsing over at Paul Laron's apartment there. He lived below his sister. And we got a call from our agency, DMR agency.
Mm-hmm.
He said, "Yeah, we just got a call from the West Coast there, San Francisco, John Lee Hooker's booking agent, Rosebud Agency, and said John's wondering if you would like to back him up on tours when he's, in the eastern half of the United States, North America." We were like, holy cow. Yeah. So obviously that did something, you know what I mean? It registered in his head. And our band name was the Kingsnakes,
Yeah.
And so it named after one of his songs, Crawlin, Kingsnakes. So we got to do that for the next 4 years at the top of what we were doing. It was just, phenomenal experience.
Yeah, very cool. So what years were that?
What's that?
What years were you guys doing that?
Oh, so then we got to do the years 1987, 88, 89, and 1990.
Yeah.
Whenever he would tour the eastern half of North America,
mm-hmm.
It was John Lee Hooker and the Kingsnakes. He'd bring like some of his band from the Coast to Coast Blues Band, like Kenny Baker was his saxophone player. I got to be very good friends with. He used to live with me for a while. And Deacon Jones on the Hammond B3, or as Hooker would say, the Hammond B3, or 3B. He was a character. And Mike Osborne was his guitar player, kind of like right-hand man. And so we would do that. It was a trip, it was a once-in-a-lifetime experience. So
yeah, incredible.
Yeah.
You did that, would you say, up to like 90, and then I think did you play with him after the Kingsnakes, or like did you play with him? Was just like you, or was it always Kingsnakes?
No, just really as the Kingsnakes, yeah. And then he went to a different level, like after like 91, with those hits that he had. We were actually playing with him when that the Healer album came out.
Yeah, that was like he had like all-star lineup. Yeah.
He's on MTV and stuff, and all this. So it was very cool.
Yeah.
And so then it was like we had another year of the Kingsnakes, I think, into 91. And then that was reaching its end. And then I got a call from Kim Simmons from Savoy Brown and asked if I would like to join that outfit. So that was I was having quite an experience back.
Yeah, that's awesome. So how long were you with Savoy Brown?
The better part of 5 years with Kim was like 1991 up until 1996.
Nice.
And we toured all North America and Scandinavia, Europe. It was a lot of traveling. Great experience.
Oh, incredible. Yeah, you guys were probably doing a lot of shows a year, probably.
Yeah, man.
A year or something, yeah.
It was a trip,
Awesome. Let's see. What we want to move on to here. So, what? Let me ask you. What stuff? We're going to make a list. One of the things we're doing with this is I do a list of links about stuff that I can find, and we can get to whatever. There's some Kingsnake stuff that is streaming. I wish there was more streaming stuff. Like that's maybe something I got to talk to Greg Spencer about, and say I'd like to see more of it out there, because well, it's just it's a streaming world now, and I know that it's not the best payday for the artists or the record companies and stuff, but it's how people get turned on to stuff. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
you might end up with more people paying for the live shows or donating money or buying your merch or maybe buying the albums and stuff anyways because they just want to support the thing or whatever, you know. But like,
Yeah.
I don't even have a CD player anymore, and I haven't really
Yeah.
10 years, you know. So, you know, Spotify, YouTube are like the main go-tos for me, and it's really cool because I can look at something so easily, or like for these, you know, we could do these podcasts and we can put it on the website, and I can have 20 links afterwards where somebody who's looking at this and you know, whatever level they're at as a fan, whether they're new or they've been a fan for 40 years, they can click, and they can learn about stuff. They can, well, this is what John Lee Hooker sounds like. This is what this sounds like, you know, and they can really get to it. And I think that's sort of a magical time or for us that we get to be able to do that. Like, I get that there was something to the passion of what it was decades ago where you had to seek it out and go chase it down, you know?
Yeah.
That certainly led to passionate fans, but there's, you know, it's a different time. And then there was also the fact that you didn't get to get turned on to everything. And some of it just was, you know, exposure. Maybe you didn't have when you went to the record store, you only had so much money in your pocket. And you're like, well, I can't buy everything that I'm sort of interested in. And maybe you chose what you knew you liked instead of going for something that you weren't certain of. And so it's a different era now, you know, where we can
absolutely
share this great stuff that's happened throughout the century, really. So, give me like a few of must listen to blues albums and your blues, in your opinion.
Okay, like any of the early Muddy Waters, you know, that had that essential early Muddy Waters band that like electrified the Chicago blues thing, you know what I mean, with Little Walter.
Yeah.
So that's like the, you know, 1949, 50, 51, 52.
Mm-hmm.
And then actually Little Walter recorded with Muddy Waters because he was just such a big name and such a great harmonica player that they would have, even after Little Walter went on his own.
Yeah. And
any Little Walter stuff, you know, he left Muddy Waters in the touring band in 1952. He had a #1 hit with an instrumental called Juke. That became a big hit, and then he had a bunch of hits through the early and mid and later 50s. He was like a big recording star, you know?
Yeah.
And he was just, in my opinion, head and shoulders above anybody that's ever drew a breath on the instrument. You know, he was phenomenal, and still to this day, you know. Let's see who else. Obviously, John Lee Hooker. Big fan of John Lee Hooker. And like I say, that one album was really big with the Kingsnakes called Hooker and Heat.
Hooker and Heat.
You know, John Lee Hooker with Canned Heat. It's called Hooker and Heat.
Oh, yeah, okay.
I think it's like a double album.
Yep.
And some of the stuff is just John Lee Hooker in the studio himself with his electric guitar and beating his foot on a piece of wood, you know, that they had microphone. It is so powerful. It's like he's a force of nature, you know. It's how somebody can do that, you know, by themselves is just, that's a testament of, you know, blues power.
Sure.
It's just incredible. What else? So much, you know. Early Geils Band was a huge influence on me. Magic Dixon, you know, phenomenal harmonica player. And you know, their early albums are very Chicago blues influenced, and they had a high energy thing going, just incredible.
Yeah.
And
I see you went into something, and you were a Butterfield Blues Band fan as well.
Oh yeah, man! I remember the first time I bought that double album, Golden Butter. It's a really good one, and it's,
I don't know if I know that one. I was a big East West fan.
Yeah, that's yeah, the Golden Butter is two. I think it's a double album, and does that one live version on there that's of Driftin' and Driftin'.
Okay.
I remember hearing that for the first time, just shattered your brain, you know what I mean? If you're a harmonica player, it was just like unbelievable. But there's so many great players out there, you know, and the one thing that it's hard for people to understand is there's so many like brilliant blues harmonica players out there, you know, nowadays and you know, in the more modern era. But everybody's like doing, or a lot of people are doing that Little Walter template, like, and it's so hard to imagine, like, to go back before Little Walter, and it was very different. You know, it was like Sonny Boy Williamson one, John Lee Williamson, who was like the big Chicago blues guy, but it was very like more simplistic and countrified harmonica. And Little Walter came in and he took that, you know, electrified it with a bullet microphone and the amplification and the reverb that they would use in Chess Studios. And he just like incorporated it to be kind of part harmonica and part saxophone, and because he had that brain, the musicality in his brain of listening to like jazz saxophone players. And so he would try to get that stuff out of the harmonica, and this crazy thing developed, which nowadays you hear people do it. It's like, oh yeah, I'm doing this, but like everybody's going off that template. You know, he was the genius that created that. It gets lost in the shuffle. You know what I mean? Of how brilliant he was.
Yeah, I think maybe because maybe, you know, whatever, he wasn't as known as a writer, or you know, I think that well, he just didn't. His longevity wasn't there, and a lot, you know. I mean, that you know, that right. His name isn't talked about as much, but I totally get what you're saying. That he, you know, was like a lightning bolt in that whole thing. That you know, that was that really it's, you know, a lot of that stuff is, you can feel the rock and roll explosion coming up in it, but
exactly right.
Like, he's full of it. I mean, it's like that excitement. He's got the same excitement that Little Richard was to bring a few years later.
Exactly.
You know,
they were all fans of Little Walter. That's what I'll tell you right now. And like Elvis was a big fan of Little Walter. See, Little Walter at that time was a big recording star. He had a lot of hits up. Yeah. You know, My Babe, and you know, instrumentals like Juke was a #1 hit. But so he was, like you say, and he had this one song called Crazy Mixed Up World that talks about that. He talks about, I love to rock and roll. That's one of the lines in his song. That's, like you say, it was just, the wave was just coming.
Yeah.
Then Chuck Berry showed up at Chess Studios and so on. And Little Richard and Jerry Lee Lewis and all the patriarchs of that crazy art form. But I'll tell you one interesting thing too, just to put Little Walter in perspective. A couple times, John Lee Hooker, when we were on the road, I remember one time waking up in the morning, there was a knock at the door, and I would think I was in the bathroom or something, and like they're like, "Hey Pete, John's at the door." I'm like, "John who?" You know, the Hooker's at the door. So I, you know, wash my face up, brush my teeth, get up, go out, and he's all dressed in his, you know, 3-piece suit and tie and gangster hat and shades. And he's like, "Oh yeah, I was gonna take you out to breakfast. I want to go over to." Gee, kidding me? Can't refuse breakfast with John Lee Hooker, right? So we went, and he did that a couple times, which again, you never forget things like that. But so we were talking. He was saying, he's going, "Yeah, you know," talking about being on the road. He said, "I'm enjoying, you know, playing with you guys and stuff. This is fun." He said, "You remind me a lot of the late great Little Walter, you know, with the harmonicas." I was like, "Wow, thank you so much," you know. But he said too, he goes, "You know, I was good friends with Little Walter, and I knew him long time." And he goes, "Everybody knows how great a harmonica player Little Walter was, you know, and everybody knows about that. That's well documented." But he goes, "I'll tell you," he said, "he was my favorite blues singer." So that puts a little perspective on things too. When you have somebody love the magnification of John Lee Hooker, you know, saying that Little Walter was his favorite blues singer. Yeah, it's a lot of perspective on Little Walter. You know, he's really something.
Yeah, that's awesome. Good stuff. Yeah, we'll have a nice little selection of stuff for people to check out. And I love that. You know, definitely Little Walter deserves every bit of love and attention that we can throw that direction. What about any current artists? You know, blues or blues related, or anything that you happen to like?
You know, I'm not so hip to like the newer stuff. You know, I should be, been busy, like teaching special education and so on, but I always go back and listen and stuff, but I'm not as in tune, by not being out on the road and stuff.
Yeah.
I plan on hopefully, like, when I get down, getting nearer to like retirement from that gig, I'm going to try to get, back and put my energy back into music. It's my first love, and hopefully get a little more in tune with that kind of stuff. And, but that's the thing, that'll never go away, like Hooker used to say, blues have been here ever since like Adam and Eve.
Yeah.
Since there was a man and a woman,
Yeah.
And that's really the fundamentals of it, because it's all about, that experience it's about the, like, the trials and tribulations in life, but it's also about the joys and happiness. It's got all that stuff in it. It's not just the sad stuff, which is cool. And I remember playing when I was way back when I was playing with Otis Lee when I was young. He used to say, at the live gigs, or he would say it off stage too, he'd say, the blues takes the blues away. So in other words, if you go, you got something going on in your life, in a relationship or whatever it is, you lost your job kind of thing, and you're feeling down and so on. If you go and, experience a real blues, and you go through all those highs and lows, a good blues artist will take you, through, all the different experiences, life experiences, then you've kind of like exercised the demons, if you know what I mean.
Sure.
If you go through it. So in other words, like the blues will take the blues away. I always liked that line.
Yeah.
It's like therapy.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. There's a great thing about it. It's like one of those things where I just think in general, when a lot of music is working at its best, it's the sort of lines between the artist and the audience become blurred or meshed, and that it's not, that there's a commonality or whatever, and that human commonality, And,
yes, and that's the sad thing about this time we're in now, like you say, that you can't do that live music thing. And it's live music is different, like you say, that's the experience.
Yeah.
Especially, with any kind of music, but especially with blues oriented music, it's, you got to experience that experience,
definitely. So you mentioned that you're an educator now, and so have you has music been a part of did you do any music education? Has that been a part of your
I haven't, but I haven't, but I used to, like, way back, I remember going into schools a little bit, like for my niece, when she was really young, I would play it in their class and talk about blues and that kind of thing. And hopefully that's something that, they would remember, like that was like second grade, I think, for her. And I remember over the years, different people say, oh yeah, you came into our classroom, and, little things like that. But I know they have different programs and so on. And I would like to, maybe in the future too, try to do something like that.
Yeah, very cool. I mean, so I'm not sure how aware you are of what we got going on. Maybe you are, but for everybody else who's listening as well. So, besides putting on the festival, the Blues Fest organization, we have a variety of different education initiatives that we're pursuing and trying to expand on. One awesome. Is we do the KJ James Scholarship.
Yeah.
And we award 3 scholarships annually in that, and we've had some great winners, Dunham Hall and Neil Manat, a couple who have been awarded that in recent years. But I will say that one of the reasons that we're really trying to continue to push it is because we don't get enough applicants. And it's not even just like, is it people who already know the blues? It's that I don't know, kids are, whether they're not playing the instruments or they're not playing, analog instruments or whatever you want to call it. Or, I don't know, we work hard to try to get the word out. And so, but it's just, you'd think the amount of applicants would be more. So we have been expanding our conversation, and we got into, it's like, well, we're going to have to get into the schools and start educating people at a younger age. So then a few years ago, we started doing, well, the other thing we've been doing, we have had a student band play at the festival for years.
That's
and so
great.
That was a little bit hard getting people rounded up for it, and again, there's, you find these kids who've got, lucky for them, they've got great parents, and their parents
Definitely.
got them music lessons and bought them instruments and all that stuff. And that's really great for them. And certainly don't ever want to take away anybody from that situation, because you can't beat great parents. But, we're always in this conversation about how do we reach other young people, and how do we try to provide opportunities for them to get exposed to stuff or to become a player, if they don't have all the same benefits that some other kids have got or whatever, So we have this Blues in Schools program that we've been doing the past couple of years, and it's really just getting rolling, but it's the idea of, going into the schools, and I think we're hitting fourth, fifth grade, whatever is what we're starting about.
That's great.
And getting that going, and more, it was just, the sad thing here is it was just starting to get going, and then we'd had a good year with it last year, and then the pandemic stuff has totally thrown things off base. And
I'll tell you, man.
Now we can't have people going into the schools, and their schedule, they don't ever know what their schedule is going to be, and the online time they have is obviously, it's, the world is chaos. It's just not a great time to be introducing new stuff. But we're trying to keep pursuing it and figure out every angle we can hit it from.
Yeah. I think that one good thing that maybe will come of this is that people will really appreciate when, like you say, they get to go experience a live gig.
Yeah.
It's like something maybe we almost took for granted. A lot of things in life we probably took for granted, that hopefully this is one thing that you can get from that, is to you're down to the fundamentals of who are you spending the pandemic with, appreciate, count your blessings, man.
Yeah.
Because it could be worse,
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Well, we should talk more about education stuff, throughout time here, or whatever. And
absolutely,
we can get you involved. I would love it if you
love it
in some way. And we got some different ideas about getting into, maybe drafting some students that we see are interested in getting some mentorships and stuff set up with them, so that we can start to develop them from that kid thing to the, through their teen years and stuff like that. Because, it's, having that as a, first off, having mentorship, but finding something that you can be passionate about is a big, big part of it,
Yeah.
Well, awesome. This has been great. I really appreciate you coming on with us today. What do you got going on? Do you got anything musically coming up if we do get out of this, or?
Not, I'm just waiting because we still got a ways to go.
We got a ways to go, yeah.
Right? But hopefully we're seeing you starting around the corner and see the light at the end of the tunnel with the vaccines and so on.
Yeah.
If it's anything like 2020, let's hope it's not a train coming at us.
Right? I don't know. I mean, I want to be optimistic, and certainly when we're making plans for the festival and everything to go, should the world be in the place that it's time for us to go, and then we're going to go this year. But at the same time, I don't know. Right now, here we are as we sit, at the end of the year here, it's pretty tough to really call it one way or the other right now. And
definitely,
as it is now, we got all our plans in place to to go in June and have it, and maybe by the time 3 months from now, things will look much rosier than they are at the moment. We'll just to keep hoping and praying on that. But
amen.
Yeah, well, very good. So, thank you a bunch for taking the time to chat with us today. I love hearing all your great stories. I'd like to remind everybody listening that this podcast is brought to you by the New York State Blues Festival, one of the largest free blues events in the country. Please mark your calendars for June 24th through 26th, 2021 for our anticipated return to Clinton Square in downtown Syracuse. For all details and information about the event, including how you can become a supporter of our organization for the festival and all that great educational stuff we're doing, please visit our website at nysbluesfest.com. Thanks again, Pete. And thank you all for tuning in to episode 2 of Somebody's Blues. Be good, dig the music, and spread the love. Peace.
Blues power.
Blues power.